7:34 p.m. In the Wetlands Agency of Town of Woodbridge. Our meeting this evening is really just on the Merritt Avenue subdivision application. We seem to have all the relevant participants here. So the might as well get started with the issue that was that we ended with at last meeting, which was the existence or non-existence of a vernal pool. And so if John or Bill, if you want to start addressing that, then we'll see what else comes up and what else other people have to say.
I think that's fine. Mr. Chairman, thank you. For the record, John Nuff, 147 Broad Street in Milford. I apologize I couldn't be with you last week, but appreciate the fact that you're holding these hearings in successive weeks, and appreciate everyone getting out to the sidewalk. And with that, I'll let Bill Kenny, who's actually an expert in vernal pools, tell you whether or not there is a vernal pool or not, and why.
And there you go.
You might be muted, Bill.
Doesn't show that he is.
Oh, okay.
He's not muted on my end.
Maybe he should telephone in.
We heard him before when his camera was off, but
Maybe he's muted at his own device.
We need some sign cards or something. Technology is wonderful.
He's calling in.
okay. Chris, maybe we can send his grandson over to Bill's house.
Set up his computer.
I'm just waiting to see if that phone call shows up in the attendee list.
Gotcha.
My attendee list shows him as being muted.
Well,
he's
now
muted.
he muted himself because he's calling in. Doesn't want to give everyone the echo.
Yeah, he'll echo if he does. Bill,
Hello?
is that you?
Yes.
Yay!
All right.
All right. Sorry about that. Too many different platforms to keep up with.
Okay. All right. So Bill, I don't know if you heard, but we did a quick introduction, and the question was posed to you as whether or not there's a vernal pool on the site, and so that's what we're all anxiously awaiting your words of wisdom on that topic.
Sure. I'm going to start with a brief introduction. I am Bill Kenny. I'm the principal of William Kenny Associates in Fairfield. I live in Milford. I actually grew up just the other side of West Rock in Hamden, so I spent many years there. I have a degree in landscape architecture from UConn, and also a degree in environmental management from the Yale School of Forestry, and actually did my graduate thesis work on the West River, the lower reaches of the West River, particularly down through Edgewood Park and West River Memorial Park in New Haven, with salt marsh restoration. But anyway, so I have a connection.
Bill, excuse me 1 second. Bill, can I interrupt you? Chris, could you put Bill on the main screen instead of Attorney Nuff?
I think it might be a
I
choice
don't know
you
how
need
to
to
do
make.
that.
Okay.
I did, but can't do that.
Stephen, if you click on the layout tab and go to grid, you'll have everybody on your screen.
Okay, all right.
The layout tab should be up on the upper right.
Right, but you
I
have to
see.
but you have to tap your screen for the layout tab to come up.
I see. So if I tap on Bill, will he be, could I pin him that way? No, he doesn't come up as.
No, find just a blank space on your screen and tap it, and the layout icon should show up in the upper right.
I do see it, okay, but I have everybody as a ribbon across the top and only you turning off as the main screen below the
Oh,
ribbon.
Go to grid.
My
Oh,
apologies
okay,
for
great.
that.
All right,
But,
let's see.
but
Very,
if you tap layout, it'll give you choices.
thank you, everybody. Very good. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. So I'm a professional wetland scientist, soil scientist, and landscape architect. Been working in this field since the late 80s, and have my own firm in Fairfield. We were retained initially to just come out to the property in December 18th of 2018 to identify and mark where wetlands are present on and immediately adjacent to the property. And so we did do that. And as you are familiar with the site plans, we on this pie-shaped property, which is bound by the Merritt Parkway to the southeast, Litchfield Turnpike to the west, and Merritt Avenue to the north, you have the West River flowing north to south through the western portion of the property along the western boundary. And then you have a series of wetlands, disturbed, mostly man-made features that border the Wilbur Cross Parkway, and they are primarily on the state DOT land associated with that parkway. At the far eastern portion of the property, the wetlands do extend onto the narrow piece of the pie of the property in that area, and they're less disturbed in the eastern portion of the property. They're more of a natural system. So we did that mapping in 2018, and more recently I've been out to the property as it relates to the proposed the development that's currently proposed. And it's my professional opinion that there is not a vernal pool on the property, and a vernal pool for a wetland area to be a vernal pool, it requires a number of different characteristics. One is that there is standing water, but not every wetland that has standing water is a vernal pool. But it needs to be, you need to have that standing water during the spring and early summer, but it cannot be there all year round. You don't want, if it's there all year, then you have the potential for a fish population. And if there's fish, they feed on the eggs and the larvae of frogs and salamanders that would be breeding in that pool area. But if the water in the wetland either infiltrates into the ground or evaporates too quickly, then there isn't enough time for amphibians to lay their eggs and for those legs to develop into mature individuals that can then leave the pool late in the spring or summer to make their way to forest land that abuts the pool. So if their pools are wet for too short a period or for too long a period, the area won't be a vernal pool. But there is evidence of ponding in these wetland areas that border the Wilbur Cross Parkway, and I have seen that, and I know Commissioner Sosensky has also identified that and observed that. But and I saw that last week. After your meeting last week, I did get a chance to get out to the site late on Thursday and saw some standing water in the eastern portion of the wetlands. And as you saw today, by today, that had evaporated or infiltrated into the ground. And this is even before the trees have started vegetation has started to leaf out, and certainly there'll be more pressure on that system as vegetation leaves out. There'll be water will stand for even shorter durations as we get into the growing season. So for that major reason that I do not find this to be a vernal pool, there's another very important thing to consider with regard to vernal pools is that it's not just the pool itself, which is critical for breeding and development of young, but you also need a substantial amount of forested land surrounding the pool, because it's during the majority of the year that the adults live in that forested land. And it's been, one number that has become quite common in discussions about vernal pool and literature is land within 750 feet of the pool. And you really want about 75% of that land to be forested. And I'm not sure, would it be, would I be able to have permissions to share an aerial photo with everyone? I could just show you the land use surrounding.
I just transferred presentation rights to you, Bill.
Okay. Let me see if I'm gonna skip this. My settings are not gonna allow me to do this with WebEx. I can do this with Zoom, but not with, unless I log out of the meeting. But safe to say that rather there being 75% forest within 750 feet, it's more like there's only 25% forest. So there's not only is there's not a proper hydrologic condition within the pool, but there also is not a suitable forested habitat bordering the wetlands on this site. So for the lack of suitable forest habitat surrounding the wetlands and the lack of adequate hydrologic conditions, it's my professional opinion, those areas are not a vernal pool. And I might add that the breeding season has started, and the third thing is there hasn't been any evidence of obligate species such as wood frog or spotted salamanders. We've been out at properties in the southwestern part of the state, in Greenwich, and the northeastern portion of the state up in Willington just last week, and we found wood frogs breeding in pools in those two far reaches of the state. So the breeding activity has started, and we would expect to see that at this site if the conditions were suitable for that. The timing is appropriate.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kenny. Stephen, do you have any questions since you were?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Kenny. I'm no expert in wetland delineation, nor am I an expert in identification of vernal pools, but my background tells me that I might challenge you a bit on your finding. So the Connecticut Association of Wetland Scientists produced a monitoring program, Edward Paulak, and he identifies some vernal pool identification during the dry season. So he calls them dry season indicators. And I saw a number of them out there last time I walked the property, and I saw them again tonight when we walked the property together. And some of those indicators are basin depression with sparse herbaceous vegetation. I saw that. I saw dark gray water-stained leaves. I saw that. I saw watermarks on the tree trunks. I saw evidence of moss draped on branches and logs in these areas. And the area in question that we're talking about, now that the wetland flags had been redone and were legible, I believe that the vernal pool or pools may span between wetland flags 57, 55, we'll call it, 57, 55, all the way to wetland flags 65, 72, 65, 72. If you are looking at a map, those might correspond with a bit of a rectangle or a square. So I saw that. I saw all those indicators again tonight. And also, I wonder if it is a little too early in the season to be inspecting a vernal pool for obligate species or evidence of breeding. And so certainly you, Mr. Kenny, have identified some areas of the state where you have encountered that already, but that's not uniform across the state, and that will vary by conditions here. We're at the base of a slope of a great elevation, and the property doesn't get a lot of sun. So things may be slow in this area. And there's certain things that I think you need to do with any certainty that you need to do as far as your investigation of the vernal pool. And I haven't heard that you've done enough of that yet. It's not a if A then B. If the vernal pool is dry, it's not a vernal pool. So these are seasonally wet areas, and so we saw some evidence of it being a seasonally wet area because it was wet for perhaps some weeks, and now it's dry. We're heading into the wet season, and I expect it's going to be wet again. So I wonder if it's too early to tell whether we're looking at a vernal pool. Moreover, your academic scenario, the best academic scenario for what is a vernal pool at 750 foot in any direction away from the center of it, that it ought to be 75% forested. I mean, that's nice if we're constructing a wetland area or something that we hope would turn into a vernal pool, or if we come upon one and there is that much land and an application was pending and we wanted to protect that much land under that best case scenario. But the fact that there's not 750 feet of forest in any direction emanating from this vernal pool does not make it not a vernal pool. So it may make it may have its own dynamic under those circumstances, but I don't think that we can ignore the physical characteristics, those telltale signs of a dry season vernal pool. The winter is considered to be a dry season, and I don't know that we're deep into spring enough to be able to say that that your investigation reveals with any certainty that there's no breeding activity in there. So I guess the answer is, as I intimated back at our meeting last week, I wonder if the commission would be well served if it had its own expert analysis of the resource out there to guide us in what we're looking at, and so we can be certain that we're protecting the resource according to the regulations. So I'll call again for this application to be designated a special, to come under the special application fee that would enable us to retain an expert at the applicant's expense so that we can peer review the good work of Mr. Kenny. But I think I think we should, as a commission, we should have our own expert analysis, and we should review them juxtaposed to one another. So I guess I'm not going to retreat from I believe, our need to have our own expert out there to corroborate the findings of the applicant's expert. So I guess that's all I have to say about the existence of whether there is a vernal pool out there or not. You know, I've challenged as much as a layperson could, I guess, credibly, Mr. Kenny's findings, and I implore the commission to retain an expert for our own analysis when I think the season might be what might reveal better what we're looking at out there as we head into the spring. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just one question. The area you're questioning is there which wetland flag?
Again, 57, and then across the wetland of 55. So you see 57 on the northern edge of that middle wetland, we'll call it, and then 55 at the southern edge. And then if you extrapolate to the east, you'll see, again, correspondingly, north and south flags 65 and 72. So again, 57, 55, and 65, 72. So that appears to be the area where I could see the dry season indicators of a vernal pool.
So that's predominantly on the highway, land that you're talking about, correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure it matters to us, but yes, I suppose if that straight dotted line there is a property boundary. I can't see it. I can't quickly see a. Oh, here it's. Well, it's like a silt fence erosion control barrier. So I'm not sure I see where the property boundary is.
Chris, can you share my screen, please? And I'll put the map up.
I see highway line. I
Should
see.
have it now, John.
And if I just also like to say that the presence of those hydrologic indicators, the dark colored leaves, silt covered leaves, watermarks on trees, the moss, those are all indicators that water ponds there, but they're not indicators of a vernal pool 100%. They are indicators that, and you find those throughout forested wetlands very commonly where there's no vernal pools. So you can have, when you have a vernal pool, you're going to have those, but plenty of times you have those indicators and you have no vernal pool. I would say more often than not, you have those conditions and there is no vernal pool. And that's why that's not considered an obligate indicator. What's the obligate indicator is the actual egg masses, development of the young, and that's really what you need to find. And this is the end of March, right before the growing season, is the wettest time of the year. You've had all winter for water to build up, if it's going to build up, where there aren't trees and shrubs and ground cover pulling water out of the ground. They are to a very limited extent right now, but with no leaves on these trees and shrubs, there's very little water being pulled out of the ground. So now is the time, if there's going to be extended periods of water ponding on the surface, it would be now. As we go into, because the rainfall in this part of the world is pretty steady throughout each month. It's a pretty, the amount of rainfall each month is on average is pretty much the same month to month. And so now is the wet period. And there's just not the hydrologic conditions. And so I'm 100% confident that these areas are not vernal pools.
Mr. Kenny, I can't say I disagree with anything you said there, except that I wonder if we have given this space enough time to materialize. I wonder if the conditions, if we're too early to be examining this site for the existence of a vernal pool.
Mr. Chairman,
I don't. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Like I was saying, we've been in Greenwich, which is a slightly warmer climate, and we were in Wellington, which is a slightly colder climate, and we found wood frogs breeding in both of those locales, and the microclimate that you discussed at this location would not be affecting the breeding of these species.
Thank you for your response. I think I've reached a limit of my, credibility on the topic, and I guess I would defer to the commission on whether or not this should be examined further. Thank you.
I guess from my perspective, since most of this wetland area is off-site on the state highway right of way, I mean, the state could come through tomorrow and they wouldn't bother asking us permission to do the drainage work that was supposed to have been done years and years ago there. So I not that I don't appreciate the thoughts about whether it's a vernal pool or not, but I just I just don't know. Even if we found it was a vernal pool, I'm not sure we'd have much control over what the state does on that side of the property line, no matter what. But that's just my 2 cents at the moment. So,
Bob, can I comment on that?
oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I might say to you, it's a fact that it's there, and until it's not, I guess it's our duty to regulate it. So if the state comes in and bulldozes the area as part of an expansion of that exit, then, maybe they'll have to confer with us, maybe they won't, but, I guess that's something we'll have to take up then. Or we mourn the loss of it then, but we did what we were supposed to do while it existed.
Mr. Chairman, it's John Nuff. It's not as if Bill was equivocal or suggested that it might be. There was only one expert here tonight, and it's Bill, and he was. I don't know that he could have been more certain, and I think that the anecdotal evidence that he offered in terms of finding true vernal pools in literally opposite ends of the states, gives a lot of credence to his finding. And if you look at the definition of a vernal pool, the water has to stand for a longer period of time than what Bill or anyone else has witnessed. We appreciate Commission Member Sosensky's passion for the topic and his admission or acknowledgement that he's not an expert, but we'd really like to keep this moving. I think Bill's been happy and my client's been happy to engage Bill to come and discuss this topic, but I think you can certainly poll the other commission members, but I think we've pretty much put this issue to bed.
I must respond, but Attorney Nuff, I haven't heard any evidence of how long that water is impounded there. So the only evidence on the record is there was water and there isn't anymore. I never heard anybody say there wasn't water, then there was water, and now there is no water. So all we've heard is that there was water. I've captured pictures of it. Mr. Kenny's acknowledged that there was water there, but there isn't anymore. And as a matter of fact,
I guess I'm just not sure how that's relevant or why that's relevant. It's a wetland. I mean, we can see.
That's part of the analysis of how to determine whether we're looking at a wetland is how long does it retain water. We do not know that.
But the point is that from the perspective of our application, no one has identified a specific harm to any wetland or watercourse, and that's the basis upon which the commission must vote. Is there a specific harm, not a generalized concern, what might happen, what could happen if somehow the sky should fall, but you must identify a specific harm to a specific wetland in order to deny the application. And we haven't heard of one yet. all the wetlands are being preserved. There is a upland review area surrounding each of the wetlands. And there's no indication, there's no evidence, there's nothing to indicate there's going to be any harm to any of those wetlands in a specific fashion.
Attorney Nuff, let me, you are an experienced land use attorney. I know that. And you should know that this hearing is only just begun. We opened the hearing briefly. We looked at the plans. We continued the hearing for a site inspection, and now we're here. From as far as I can tell, the only issue we're talking about at this moment that has consumed the meeting time tonight is whether there's an existence of a vernal pool. I do not believe we have even touched on the matters of the development's impact on the wetlands on the area. So let's stay focused. All we're talking about right now is whether we're looking at a vernal pool in this wetland area. There's the bulk of the application is still going to unfold ahead of us.
What do you folks want to do about the vernal pool issue? Let's try to get that one behind us in some fashion. Should we, retain our own expert? Are people comfortable with what Mr. Kenny said? Does everyone share the concerns that Stephen has? So I'd like to hear from other people.
Yeah, this is Dave Speranzini, and my question is like, how quickly would we be able to determine if this is a vernal pool if we hire our own expert? Is it something that they need to, observe for an extended period of time, or do they just go out there and look and say yay or nay, and then we could be done with it in a week? I just don't know what it takes to make a determination.
I guess if water was there and it's not there now, in my mind, that means water wasn't there long enough. If it's not there now, so I guess, but again, everyone else speak up. I don't want to monopolize the conversation. So,
well, I've been listening to the discussion, and it seems to me that if the criteria that Mr. Kenny has expressed are the correct criteria for defining a vernal pool, we do not have a vernal pool.
Mr. Chairman.
Jack, are you going to have any comment?
Yes. The question I have is, when breeding kicks off, how quickly does it happen in terms of length of time? And the reason I'm asking this is I take my dog down to the Fitzgerald and we walk around there, and the day that was 70 degrees, the frogs were active, multiple varieties of them based on the sound. And of course, as soon as it cooled off again, there was no sound today. Whether that's considered a vernal pool or not, or it certainly is a breeding area, and there certainly aren't any fish in it. And it's a very active wetlands there on the other side of the road, and kind of a swamp where the frogs live. And so the question is how fast, how much time is needed for a species to breed, and how much water is needed, or how much wet in a vernal pool is needed for those species to hatch and mature and be able to leave. And I don't know anything about those critters, if it's a few days, a few weeks, a few months. And so just a couple sentences on the life cycle, I guess, would be what I'm looking for, relative to the amount of time needed.
Sure. There's two primary species. The most common species are the wood frog and the spotted salamander. and the wood frog generally will start their mating season earlier than the spotted salamander, maybe by perhaps a couple of weeks. And they will, their eggs will hatch more quickly within a few weeks. And then, so there, and you raise a good point. They could have an initial wave where they come to a pool and then things cool off, and then they have a second wave. My main point with this is that when you have a wave like that, the pool area has water in it throughout that period, so that
Correct.
it needs,
from what I observed.
right. So it needs to be there waiting for them. So you do need, generally the pools are areas that are standing water a foot or more, not much. I would say on average around a foot or so. And so when it's shallower than that, it's just too transient. The ponding is for too short a period of time, and you might get some amphibians laying their eggs there, but it dries out before the eggs can hatch or before the young can develop and to a point where they can move off to the adjacent forest.
Okay. Then I'm comfortable with the what was presented, that the vernal pool does not exist. And that we don't need to have somebody else come in.
Mr. Chairman,
Take a look at it.
just furthermore on the topic of the commission's own analysis, I would suppose that the expert that the commission would retain would not limit his or her review to the existence of the vernal pool, but would undertake a review of the impact of the development on the resources, on the wetlands in the area. So I don't want us to myopically just look at this as if it's not a vernal pool, then we're done here. There are development impacts to the remaining wetlands on the property which exist, irrespective of whether one of them whether a part of one of them is a vernal pool or not. So I believe that any expert that the commission would retain, the scope of the work should be to provide us with an analysis of the environmental impact of this project at this property. So not just the matter of the vernal pool. I just wanted to tidy up the discussion with that footnote.
Okay, thanks. Gene, anybody else have anything they want to add?
I will concur that I don't believe there's a vernal pool there. It seems to me a vernal pool has water in it throughout the winter and spring and dries up after the breeding season and then is dry during the summer. So it's already dry and it's March. It doesn't seem to me like it meets that criteria either.
So the other issue then to consider though is what Stephen just mentioned. Do we need somebody to evaluate the overall impact of the project? Anybody have thoughts on that?
I'll continue to advocate for our own experts. So here's the way I see this, just as a thumbnail sketch of my impression here. We have development on what appears to be 85% of the property or so. So much of that property would sheet flow its stormwater into these wetlands, would recharge these wetlands. It seems the only flows that they do get are the overland flows. You could tell by looking at the topography of the property that it slopes from Merritt Avenue southward into these wetlands. So the development of this property as it's proposed is going to deprive these wetlands, all of them, of overland flows, which could deprive them from up to 80, I don't know, 80, 85, 90% of pre-development flows. That's going to have a detrimental, deleterious effect, a physical impact on these wetlands. So that's kind of what we're talking about. And if the commission is not able to go toe to toe with the applicant's experts, then we really won't know the true impact of this development on the resource there. And I believe, we have missed an opportunity to put our best foot forward here in the analysis.
If I can jump in, I was going to say, I think the issue of what Stephen is saying makes sense as it relates to the impact on those wetlands, especially if those wetlands are belonging to the state and have been created by a lack of maintenance of drainage that should have been there, that is there, that is not being done. And also considering potentially what could happen with the re-engineering of exit 59 and the tunnels. So I think it to a great extent, it makes sense to understand long-term what would happen if those wetlands remain there in terms of the conditions of the existing drainage, and what might happen if that drainage is corrected and those wetlands then no longer are wetlands because the water's under continuing drainage. So I would agree that it would make sense to have the study done.
My perspective, I'm not opposed to having something done, but my concern, and this may be heresy, I almost care less about those wetlands along the parkway than I do the impact on the West River.
And that should be part of it also. Yes, I think.
I mean, we're not going to be able to do anything to stop the runoff from the highway that's going to come down into those wetlands with the sand and salt and everything else that goes down there. So the wetlands or the drainage swales or whatever is there that's being filled up is, just serves to, prevent some of those contaminants from getting to the river. I'm of the mind that our focus really should be on being sure that, and we've had Jim look at this, but he does it more from an engineering standpoint rather than a wetland standpoint, that the compensatory storage that was created, the detention basin, those things will work the way they're supposed to prevent things from getting into the West River. So again, my focus is a little bit different, but that's just my personal opinion. So,
Mr. Chairman, perhaps if both John Paul and Bill could weigh in on some of your discussion, particularly the assertion that we're going to be depriving the wetlands of overland flow, and Bill can give a little bit of a discussion about functions and values, and maybe that can put your minds at ease, or maybe it can lead you in a better direction in terms of your determination whether or not to engage a third party. So if you could bear with us, and maybe John Paul and Bill could further illuminate us.
Can you see the screen? This is the site plan.
Yep.
Is that visible?
Yep.
These wetlands are charged by the water coming off the Merritt Parkway. There's very little overland flow that gets to this wetland from the north. The ground up in here is a uniformly beautiful, medium coarse sand and gravel with an extremely high infiltration rate. And anybody who walked around here can see that the foliage was a very, very brash, thin growth. There was no lush foliage in here. This area does not retain water. This water charging these wetlands, and the fact they even have drainage in here, and there's actually some more drainage up in here that's just buried. And you can see the two storm manholes. The majority of the water that ends up in this, the Merritt Parkway is about this location here, and this is a very steep slope. That's what's recharging these wetlands. It has nothing to do with what's coming off of our site. Very little of what comes off this site is recharging. And as I said before, You can tell that by just looking at the vegetation that's there. The vegetation, there's not lush green grass. It's very stringy. There's a lot of brambles. There's a lot of creeper vines. There's very little indication that there's any kind of retainage of moisture in this area. So the idea that we're going to shut off the recharge for this all comes from the Merritt Parkway. And this was put in to handle that. This one right here was to handle that flow off the Merritt Parkway, not from the site. So the idea that we're shutting that off is not quite true from an engineering and from a hydrologic standpoint.
John Paul, Mr. Chair, can I respond to that?
Sure, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you. John Paul, I mean, talking about the vegetation there and whatnot, that really doesn't get us anywhere in the analysis of whether or not these lands recharge the wetlands down slope. So you could be from another planet, just read the contours on your own plan, and everything does appear to sheet flow toward these two large wetlands.
That's not true.
The contours of the property reveal that. It goes from a high of 84 to a
because
low
the
of
contours
88.
pitch that way doesn't mean the water flows that way. There's a fairly high groundwater table here, about 5 feet. And the reason that's getting recharged is because the soils are so porous. So there's no overland flow here. There's very little overland flow from the north. The overland
John,
flow.
I'm talking about storm events. I'm talking about storm events. I'm not
So am
talking about groundwater.
So am I.
Okay. Well, again, I know that if the rain falls from the sky and it falls on the ground and it's not immediately infiltrating into the ground, and we don't know that it's not, it's going to flow to the lowest point.
And I'm telling you, it is immediately infiltrating, because if it wasn't, you would see a lot more lush vegetation. This site does not support that because the groundwater or because the rainwater infiltrates so quickly.
I have to let me stop you, John, just by saying that you're an engineer. I'm not sure that you could that you could give credible testimony on this, and I'm just a wetland commissioner.
I object to that very
so
strongly.
I don't know that I could challenge you, but somebody may have to explain this.
I object to that very strongly. I am an engineer.
Hydrology
is part of my practice.
I know you're an engineer. I said you're an engineer, but you're talking to me about wetland delineation and soils and things like that, and
we do.
You're limited in that.
Okay. If I could add to this, that I agree wholeheartedly with what John is saying, that there, and I also agree with what the commissioner is saying. The land does pitch towards those wetlands, but there's a couple of things you need to consider. It's a very gentle pitch, and as John said, the soils are a sand and gravel soil. And if you look at the infiltration capacity of these soils, and you go to like a document TR55 that is used by every engineer in the region to estimate runoff from the land when they're doing studies like John had to do for this project, you're going to need a rain event greater than 1 inch in depth to get any type of runoff from this. And the average rain event you have throughout the year is about a 1/2 inch. And wetlands in the area, they're not driven by the very infrequent larger storms. They're driven by those storms that happen every 3 days, the storms that happen on a regular basis, those smaller storms. And 90% of your storms in any year are 1 inch or less. So for all of those storms, there's no runoff. It's going down in and feeding the groundwater, as John described it. That the slope is so gentle and the soils are so porous that almost all the water from rain events goes into the ground. And if you look at your town GIS, you can see the amount of impervious surface from the Wilbercross Parkway and how that drains. Half of the parkway is draining right towards the whole southbound or westbound, whatever you want to call it, lane is draining towards this property. And unlike our property where it's a very gentle slope, that slope coming down off of the parkway is a 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 slope, very steep. So if you're going to get runoff coming, surface water coming towards those wetlands, it's my professional opinion that it's predominantly coming from the Merritt Parkway or the Wilbur-Cross Parkway, excuse me.
You know,
Spending too much time in.
And even
Thank
looking
you,
at, sorry, go ahead.
just like, can I just respond to that right? Thank you, Mr. Kenny. But I'm looking at your soil science, your soil delineation report of December 18, 2018, and it has that whole area we're talking about in question identified as a type 308 soil, which is somewhat poorly drained. So, you know, I guess I'm just using, you know, your materials to figure out what's going on here. And, you know, if these soils are somewhat poorly drained, then
I'm sorry. So the 308 represents a disturbed soil. And so if you see in our report on page 3, we say that the drainage class for that ranges from a well-drained to a somewhat poorly drained. So when it's immediately adjacent, within a few feet of the wetlands, it's going to be somewhat poorly drained. But for the majority of the site, it's a well-drained soil and has that very high infiltration rate.
you know, it's interesting. Almost you have pegged almost the entire site as a 308 disturbed soils. Then it's the first time.
Well, we see if you look at our map, we call it a 308-20 or 308-30, and the 30 is the undisturbed soil. So we recognize this site has some native virgin soil on it, but it also, as you saw, there's quite a bit of bulky debris on the property. There's been a lot of dumping on the property and disturbance over many decades. So it's there's some virgin undisturbed areas, and then there's pockets of disturbance, and but the underlying the subsoils is the sand and gravel. You look at the subsoil that's been exposed by the recent construction, and you could see the rounded cobblestone and gravel that's throughout the surface. It's half stone. There's so much gravel in that soil. It's very evident when you walk across the surface.
Yes, there's definitely truth to that. Although I have to say, Mr. Kenny, it looked like a lot of that property had been previously disturbed. It looks like a lot of fill. I saw things from wheel hubs, steel wheel hubs to bricks, sheet metal, things like that. So, maybe on a map that was generated years ago, there were a lot of, upland soil 30 types, but the conditions on the property there, those soils appear to be disturbed historically, and they appear to be poorly drained, even by your own notation on your report. So, I guess it's a little of both, let's say. But the principal point I'm making is overall, I think that we would benefit from an analysis. I do believe that there are physical impacts anticipated for these wetlands, as I indicated, even though there's been some attempt to explain it away.
Well, the only thing I was going to say when we were talking about topography, when you look at C1, John's map in the submission, even though the 1 foot gradients that are shown on the map, if you follow those, they would basically direct any runoff on the surface that doesn't infiltrate toward the very bottom of the wetland range, basically. So I don't see, even at that 1 foot gradient line, the water getting into the wetlands we're talking about coming off the site. Coming down the hill from the parkway, yes, definitely. But if you look at the map closely, what little flow there might be would be heading right down toward the West River and avoiding most of those wetland areas there that we're talking about.
Well, it's interesting, Bob. I guess the way I see it, it looks like those flows would track the flows I'm expecting that would go overland and reach those wetlands for recharge. I guess that 100-foot regulated area limit line going from the back of 24 Merritt all the way to the cul-de-sac, the end of the cul-de-sac, I guess that might be the line there, where everything to the south of that would be expected to flow into the wetlands. So that upland review area in 13 lots represented by 13, 14, and 9, I guess I'm sensitive to the point you're making, but there's still flows that can be seen topographically that would flow into those wetlands. And we have other problems too, I think, that need to be addressed. We have the entire upland review area is going to be, what's not denuded into lawn is going to be built on with houses and driveways and things like that. So we have buildings, physical improvements in our upland review area that, just without knowing any more, can be presumed to have a deleterious effect on the wetlands and water courses because of the disturbance or activities in the upland review area. That's the purpose of an upland review area. So,
Mr. Chairman, I mean, again, this is pure speculation. Commission member Sosensky is trying to replace the knowledge of two experts, licensed professional engineer. He's disputed his expertise. He's told Bill Kenny that he refuses to believe, how these soils drain. Bill is a professional soil scientist. What's the purpose of having an expert here, to present the application if you're just going to throw out, the information that they are, trying to provide to the commission? I get the sense that if John Paul or Bill were to say that 2 and 2 is 4, Mr. Sosensky would disagree with that. The fact that there is work taking place in the upland review area is not a reason to deny the application absent some demonstration of harm. And there is no harm. There is no demonstration of harm to any wetland. I mean, he's made the suggestion of having the commission engage a peer reviewer. Substantively, we're not concerned about that, but in terms of just time and expense, we are. I mean, maybe we could clear up that issue and then move on, because I think we're sort of retreading old ground.
Can I respond, Mr. Duff? I know this could be frustrating, and I know that we have different interests here, but we haven't even really just, I don't believe we're really far into this application. We might be or so, but we're just talking about wetland impacts, and nobody's discarding any of your client's expert testimony or the clarity of what your position is. I'm only indicating that, another expert might find that what I'm talking about, could have a negative impact on the wetlands. I have not seen anything in print or whatsoever from your side that reports that there's not going to be a deleterious effect on the wetlands. Can you point to something in the record to me now that provides some analysis that this development is not going to have a detrimental effect on the wetlands and watercourses?
Yeah, I think Bill is prepared to discuss that at least on a general basis.
Okay, so but you're all right. So point is we still have a little ways to go, and I'm not sure, it's a little unfair of you to kind of try to dismiss what I'm trying to do here to in my analysis of the application is just speculative or wanting to dismiss your expert's testimony. I'm trying to foster the fullest discussion possible from the commission standpoint without an expert analysis. So that's what you're seeing. That's all.
Bill, do you want to talk generally about the wetlands impact then, and we'll get off the vernal pool issue? And, like I said, I'm more concerned about the impacts and what's being done to protect the West River. And TPNZ is going to have issues on flooding, which, we've tried to deal with sort of here, just so that it doesn't have to come back to us later if they do approve something. But to the extent that you could just talk about the the wetlands protections that may have been integrated into this plan so that we have some comfort there, and then we could decide whether we need to hire somebody else or not. So
Sure. Be pleased to do that. And that it is true. I have not, due to a busy schedule, I have not produced a written impact assessment report, but I have studied the project and have been on the site recently and am familiar with the site conditions and the project design.
and not to interrupt you, but we did push this to get it to this week, so we're not faulting you for not having a report at this point. It was just a week, so.
Understood. Thank you. So I would identify certainly the West River as being the primary resource. Both all wetlands and watercourses deserve protection, but that certainly is the highest quality resource that's on the site. And when you look at that, it's being the river, the size it is, it's a significant river for this area. It's primarily being driven by the land that is upstream, the square miles of watershed that is upstream of here, and the water that's being generated from that watershed and coming down the river. But that being said, the project still is designed in a way to protect the river. And you have the development setback primarily outside of the 100-foot review area, or your upland review area. The homes and the driveways and the new road are east or upland of that review area, and the disturbance within the review area is to create this basin. There's one basin that's 4 to 5 feet deep, and then a much larger or equally sized area of extended storage that will extend generally the full width north to south from lot 1 down through lot 8, the full length of West River. So this basin will extend between the river and the development to provide that protective measure. So runoff from the development will flow to this basin where with the vegetation that'll be proposed, it'll be vegetated with a meadow vegetation, native meadow vegetation. So it'll allow for infiltration of that water and biofiltration as the water moves through the plants above ground and the root systems below ground and the soil bacteria and that are associated with those root systems to help clean that water and prevent that water from having a direct discharge to the river. So it'll go through this meadow basin area and be cleaned and detained before it's released to very slowly released to the West River as groundwater, which is primarily how the water moves through the property today, as was discussed, because the soils are so porous that the vast majority of the water that falls on the site from rain infiltrates into the ground and slowly makes its way to the West River. And the project design is in such a way to replicate that process of water movement through the property, and it'll allow for detaining the water and also cleaning the water. The wetlands that are off-site to the southeast in the drainage corridor at the base of the Wilbur Cross Parkway, they are, for the most part, man-made and formed over time through activities associated with the construction and management of the parkway over many decades. And as has been discussed, that there's very little surface runoff from the property draining to those wetlands now. And because no activities are proposed within the wetlands themselves, there's not going to be any direct impacts, what we consider direct impacts. And that would be when you're working in a wetland itself, either filling or excavating or paving, but nothing like that is proposed. So there's no direct impacts. And then you're left with the potential for what we call indirect impacts. And that primarily is how can something that's near the wetland affect the wetland? And it's mostly the greatest potential for that effect is through the water movement. And and then you look at stormwater runoff during construction and after construction. So to protect the wetlands during construction, the standards that you are very familiar with soil erosion and sediment control measures that will be used. And again, this site is going to have a very low potential for soil erosion and for sedimentation, just again, because the soils are so porous and the site is relatively flat. Although you can see the contours on the drawing, when you walk out there, you really feel like you're on a flat surface. There aren't any steep slopes or anything like that. So when you combine that with the soils, the very porous soils, there's not much runoff. So the potential for soil erosion and sedimentation is very low. But that being said, there is a robust soil erosion and sediment control plan that John has developed and has been submitted to you with certainly perimeter silt fencing, inlet controls. As catch basins are installed, they'll be protected, and then stabilized construction entrance and things of that sort. And then after construction, you manage the stormwater, as I've already discussed, with the basin that's near the river. So with no activities proposed in the wetlands and in the river themselves, and then with the proposed measures during and after construction, the soil erosion and sediment controls and the stormwater management basins, it is my professional opinion that the project will not adversely affect the wetlands. I would like to add one other thing to that, is that I do recommend that that some split rail fencing be installed to provide a very clear demarcation between the developed areas of the property and these wetland areas. So that would be between the basin and the home sites, just on the eastern side of the basin, a split rail fence through that area to get a nice clear demarcation for future, to help minimize the potential for residents of the development to create some sort of impact in the future.
Thanks very much, Bill.
You're welcome.
Have any questions about what was just discussed? Hey, Chris, do we have anybody in the public that wants to speak or is signed in, or?
Chris.
We'll proceed. Chris will be back soon, I'm sure. Yeah, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I'm sorry, I'm taking up so much time, folks. So, Mr. Kenny, what's the purpose of an upland review area or a buffer zone?
It's a regulated upland review area. So it's a zone for review by your agency and other agencies in other towns to review a proposal. For example, if we were proposing a new road such as the Wilbercross Parkway and we were elevating 20 feet above the wetland and sloping down right to the base of the wetland, there would be a significant potential for soil erosion on that slope and sediment making its ways into the wetland, and after the fact, significant runoff from the road to go into the wetland. So that you'd want to be able to review that and be able to make a decision of, can that design be improved or should it just be denied outright? And so similarly, when you have development that's being proposed here with this residential development on a relatively level property with very porous soils, it's you have different proposals And so it's good to have that review area so that you can look at some proposals that have less potential for impact and other proposals that have more potential for impact, and then you can decide what you feel is appropriate to be approved by your agency.
Okay, so the upland review area, that's the area that's adjacent to the natural resource that there's some presumption that some activities in that area could have a negative physical impact on the regulated area. Is that so? And that's why we review the activities in the upland review area. Are those true statements?
Yes, it's a good point that they're immediately adjacent to the wetlands and watercourses that you are charged to protect. So it makes sense that you review activities that are in those areas.
Yes, and it is true that some activities could have a detrimental effect on the physical conditions inside the wetlands, right? That activities in an upland review area?
Yes.
Like building a road, for instance, could have, in an upland review area adjacent to the wetlands, could have a negative impact on the wetlands. That's true, right?
Sure, yes, certainly something like the Wilbur-Cross Parkway.
Okay, so how about building houses in an upland review area? Is that likely to impair the function or values of the upland review area if we have buildings in it?
Let's be clear, we're focused on functions and values of wetlands, not upland review areas.
Okay, so that of course brings me to my next point is I haven't seen an analysis from you on any of the wetland values in these wetlands. So we're kind of flying blind on what the values and functions of the wetlands are out at the property. So it might be hard for us to have this discussion. So, but in your professional opinion though, are you prepared to say that building houses within building a house within 25 feet of a wetland could have a negative physical impact on that wetland?
You know, we have to be dealing with what the application is, not just some theoretical thing, though. You can't
Lot
expect
9,
Mr. Kenny to.
I understand, but Bob, lot 9 does appear to be about 20 to 30 feet. There's not even any indicator, but I don't have a slide rule here, but lot 9 appears to be within 25, 30 foot of wetland flag 57.
That is true.
Which we already had a discussion about whether or not that's part of a vernal pool system. So the point is, Mr. Kenny, is I guess I'm challenging you when you can so swiftly dismiss wetland impacts in the face of buildings in our upland review area adjacent to these wetlands and these slopes so I get so that, and again,
well, I would just like to say I didn't swiftly dismiss that. In the interest of time in a meeting, I make a conclusion that's relatively brief. But I have closely reviewed this, and I do have 30 years of experience with these items. And so, although my presentation may be brief, my thought process and evaluation is considered well considered.
And I want to compliment you. I saw your CV. You no doubt are an accomplished soil scientist and an expert in so much of what you talked about tonight. So that's unquestioned. But there are values and functions to the upland review area that are going to be diminished by the existence of development in the upland review area, and that's probably the extent of my comments on it, because I'm not an expert in any of the pertinent fields. But perhaps we should hear from somebody who's an expert in these fields. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 buildings that are either all or partially in our upland review areas, which are anticipated to diminish the function of the upland review area as it functions in water quality that reaches the wetland areas, that functions in terms of providing nutrients that are delivered to the wetland areas from the upland review areas. So I could carry on about the functions and values of an upland review area.
But then rather than continue talking about things that at least our side is not expert on, I guess what we should do is just make a decision as to whether we want to have another wetlands specialist, soil scientist look at this plan and comment on it. You know, for us to keep going on and on about you know, our lack of expertise is not really going to get us anywhere. So I don't know if you know, if everyone wants to sort of chime in on what their thoughts are, you know, agency members, as far as having somebody else take a look at that as far as wetlands impact. I mean, we've had Jim Preddy look at it. He's more an engineer, albeit he's our wetlands consultant. But if the thought is that we need to have another expert look at this to confirm or suggest changes to the current design, we should probably just bring this to a head rather than keep, you know, going.
Can I just put one little item in perspective? Bill Kenny touched upon it briefly. The watershed that feeds this area is approximately 10,000 acres. We're working on approximately 2 acres in a 10,000 acre watershed. And I really, and it's a very heavily developed watershed below the last lake, above Knowles Pond. It's a very heavily developed watershed. Above Knowles Pond, it's relatively open because it's regional water authority, but Bethany has quite a bit of development in the shed. But down below Knowles Pond, where this area is, you have houses right on top of the river, all the way up to Knowles Pond. Lawrence Street, all that area, it's all feeding into this. So I just want to put that point out there, that this is a very small fish in a very big pond.
Yeah, thanks, John. I guess Stephen's concern and our concerns are that we're not going to, don't want to make it worse. You know, this is a chance not to make it worse, and that's what we just need to confirm. So, you know,
not making it worse. The watershed that feeds this wetland comes off the Merritt Parkway. Period. 99% of it. And I'll make that as a design professional. The rest of the water that comes off this property, we're putting into the detention pond, infiltrating back through the ground. It gets back into the West River. We provide a compensatory storage in the form of a shallow pool here, which will only start to work in the upper storm events, in the 75 percentile events. All the impervious surface is grabbed, treated, and pushed to the detention pond. Sediment forebays, there should be very little sediment on this. There should be very little sediment migration. But as I said before, the balance of this wetland that's along the south side of the property, you can even see the storm inlet that feeds wetland flags 10, 9, 8. That whole wetland is created by that storm wall. The rest of them are created by the manholes that are above them. And the only reason we don't show it is because I can't go 60 feet onto the state right of way without a permit. We weren't going to do that. It's far enough away. And Mr. Kenny has already said the same thing. There's no vernal pool here. So the idea that activity in the upland review area is going to have an impact on these wetlands, I think, is minimal at best.
well, not to jump the gun, but I tend to agree with you, John. It's just Mr. Szynski is the one that has to be convinced. So, but I would appreciate just some confirmation from somebody else, just that we're doing all we can to protect the wetlands with respect to the West River area. And that, from my standpoint, is probably the only thing I would Well, that's the thing I'd be most concerned about, I should say.
Well, just again, to hit that one again, we're staying 50 to 75 feet even farther away from this river. The second you go above Merritt Avenue, everybody's in the river. Literally, and I mean that literally. I mean, everybody's 10, 15, 20 feet from the river. We have probably the most separation and the best groundwater or the best surface water treatment of anybody on this shed.
I agree. Even
Yeah, two, and I hate to throw more monkey wrenches out there, but are we expecting, according to 7.5 of our regulations, any alternatives that cause less or no environmental impacts to the wetlands?
there's no activity in the wetlands though, so
Right, but I mean,
never really treated. We've never really used that provision to, unless there's an activity in the wetlands, to look at alternatives. I kind of think we should just decide whether we want to hire somebody or not, and then move on, because we're just we need to get by that issue first.
Great, thanks,
Is
Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, John. Go ahead.
No. I was simply agreeing with you that it would be great if we can hear from all the commission members on the question you posed.
Okay, what does everybody think?
I certainly would like to see a report that corroborates or has a different view on the subject. If it corroborates, fine, we're done. If it's different, then we'll figure out the differences and what impact there is. Let's put it to bed and have somebody else look at it. Then we'll know.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think we should have a independent expert take a look at it for our benefit.
We can do it promptly, yes.
And commissioners, that the result of that report could provide us with the impetus to, it's possible that could lead us to conclude that there's a significant impact here, in which case it could compel the applicant to produce prudent and feasible alternatives. So, the report can be useful not only to educate us professionally on what's going on out there, but it could also allow us to make greater use of our regulations and see what other alternative plans could be out here that are less intrusive to the wetlands and maybe even less development in our upland review area.
All right, so I will get a hold of somebody tomorrow if that's your decision. And I'm assuming at this point that you would then be continuing this hearing to your regular meeting in April, which would be April 27th.
I think that would be the plan, only to give the person enough time to get something done in that period of time.
And then to be able to get it to Mr. Kenny so he could respond or whatever. So then we'll do that. So I will move on with that. If there's any additional fees that need to be collected, I will let the applicant know. There was a sizable fee that was paid up front. I don't seem to think that we're going to need any additional fees, but we have a provision to do so if we need it. So that being said, we did have Mr. DeLeo, who had his hand raised once or twice and then he put it down. So I can unmute him and see if he still wishes to speak.
The other thing I should add. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Can I speak now? Can you hear me? Can you all hear me? Am I
Yes.
on? Okay,
Yes.
Very good. Dear Chairman Blythe and members of the Inland Wetland Commission, this letter is regarding the application for the subdivision at Merritt Avenue containing 14 two-family, 3-bedroom rental properties, 28 apartments in a relatively small area. We ask the Commission to please consider several facts regarding this development. The development is in the T3 suburban zone, which consists of, I'm quoting, low-density residential areas adjacent to higher zones that have some mixed use. This is stated in our zoning regulations. Merritt Avenue residents do not consider this development low density. This development is in a flood-prone area. The March 22 study by Cardinal Engineering confirms this on page 3. Also, properties on Merritt Avenue in the area adjacent to Route 15 embankment in West River experience high groundwater and flooding during rain events. Another study, Army Corps of Engineers, and I'm quoting, April 2013, regarding flooding states. To make matters worse, flood development, both residential and commercial, has been extensive over the years in Woodbridge Flats. These are the points I'm trying to make. We keep doing these things and put more things into Woodbridge Flats. Some folks are claiming the removal of the Pond Lily Dam has eliminated flooding. Cardinal Engineering Study 2009 stated removal of the Pond Lily Dam does not have an appreciable effect on upstream flooding. Next to none of the flood mitigation recommendations in these studies have been implemented. Are we going to continue to ignore these studies and continue new construction to the detriment of existing structures? Isn't it time to limit the extensive development in this floodplain area until existing problems are corrected? Stormwater drainage is a constant concern. The DOT drains the tunnel as well as Route 15 embankment into the West River adjacent to the proposed development. Deficiencies in its drainage system have never been corrected. The 18-inch in wall at the base of Merritt Avenue, Cardinal Engineering Study 212. This end wall has never been replaced. Improving the DOT drainage system was discussed at the last Public Heroes Tunnel meeting with the DOT and CDM Smith Engineers. DOT indicated an improved drainage system would be included in the Heroes Tunnels project. That may be years from now. The DOT future Exit 59 plan entails removing many existing homes and businesses to relieve traffic congestion. They plan on extending both Route 69 Litchfield Turnpike and Route 15 Merritt Parkway. The extent of these changes in the Exit 59 plan speaks to the deficit in the current infrastructure. This includes both drainage and traffic. The residents residing in the Woodbridge Flats have been inundated by flooding and traffic for many years. The impact of 23-bedroom apartments and 60 cars draining into the existing high water table can only aggravate the flooding problems. Members of the commission, please consider the traffic congestion. Another 60 autos would add to Merritt Avenue. Please consider existing residents who have seen more flooding, with more development. Since at least 1982, a long list of flood studies have been done with no implementation of their recommendations. We feel this development should not be approved until both drainage and traffic infrastructure improvements are made. We ask the members of the commission to consider the sentiments of the people of Merritt Avenue, as well as the commercial interest of the developer. Sincerely, Frank DeLeo, Woodbridge West River Flood Mitigation and Restoration Committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to note that the letter that was just read by Mr. DeLeo was submitted previously into your hearing record. It was received on February 8th, 2022, and has now been noted as being read into the record, and all commission members or agency members have had a copy of that particular letter.
Thanks, Chris.
Uh,
Anyone else there that, Chris, that they want, that who wishes to speak? We, by the time we meet next on this, we should be in person. So, therefore, there will be a chance for other people to address the issues.
we've been told that starting next week, there will be in-person meetings, so assuming that COVID behaves itself, our meeting on the 27th should be in person.
Great.
We will need an extension from the applicant though for
We
for the
will,
timeline.
yes.
Of course, and you have that. But Chris, could you, and we can do this offline tomorrow. I'm curious as to who the commission typically uses for third-party review.
Sometimes we've used David Lord, sometimes we've used George Logan, so I'm gonna have to reach out and see who's available the quickest to get something done.
Okay, thank you.
Been talking about this for a while now. Does anyone else want to say anything before we continue the hearing until our April meeting? All right. Then we will continue this public hearing until our, what's it, April 27th meeting, Chris? Is that it, the next meeting?
Yes, that is correct. And at this point, I would say it's gonna be in person, because that's what I was told by upstairs.
All right, then. Thank you everyone for, well, agency members could stay on because we have a couple other things we could do. But Mr. Nuff, Mr. Kenny and Mr. Garcia, thank you for helping us tonight. So
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Hope you all
Thank
have a
you.
good night.
I would just note for the record that if Mr. Kenny submits a written report, it will be posted on the inland wetlands page of the town website, along with all of the other application materials which are posted there. And people are welcome to submit written comments or email me, whatever works for people.
much. All right. So what else do we have on the agenda? We just have minutes, Chris. Is that all that's left?
Yeah, you have your fast minutes from today's site inspection. I'll be suitably impressed.
Yes. In fact, they were 100% accurate in my mind, but anyway, even though I wasn't there, they looked fine.
They
Okay.
were not even a typo.
All right. So, you know, I for some reason I can't find the other minutes. I don't know what I did with them. I must have left them in my office. But if we want to go backwards, I guess we could approve today's site visit minutes and the last week's site visit minutes or whatever it was, the 14th.
Just a quick on today's, it says Monday in the narrative, not Wednesday.
Oh, Gene, always finding that stuff.
That's
Thank
the
you,
thing
Jean.
I looked at.
That's because I cheated and I used the last inspection that you did on a Monday.
That's what I figured, but I haven't looked at that
Alright.
one. So.
Thank you, Jean. All right, so with that correction on the Wednesday for Monday, do we have a motion to approve the site visit minutes from today?
I'll make that motion to approve.
Right, second,
Yeah, I'll second.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, okay, 5-0, that's done. So the Seymour Road site visit of the 14th, that looked okay to me also. Anybody have any questions about that?
That was a Monday.
That wasn't, I guess, do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve those minutes.
Thanks, Jack. Second, Dave.
I'll second that. Yeah.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions. Okay, so those are done. Like I said, I don't have the other minutes in front of me. I know I went through one or two of them. But if somebody has them with them, Jean is always good about that. I don't know.
Yeah, I have the ones that we had last week, but I don't know where they are right now.
All right. If it makes it easier for you, I will just carry them over to your April meeting.
I'm glad we do that, if that's okay. So,
Yeah,
That's
okay, good.
fine. I mean, we've got drafts up posted, so we're good.
Good.
so, and Chris, any enforcement issues that we need to talk about?
I did send out a cop. Okay, we had received a call and an email from some people who had observed some trees being cut over opposite the end of the high school on North Pease Road. I had sent an email to the property owner. I wasn't sure if the email was the right one, so then I sent a copy of the letter. And this is property that's owned by the Torrances. There were trees that were cut only in an upland review area, not in the wetlands per se. And what he indicated in the email that he sent me was that the intent was this had formerly been farmland and they were going to restore it to being, pasture, open meadow, with an appropriate seed mixture. So that's that. And then on 70 Pease Road, we'd had a complaint that there may have been some buried stumps there and that there was sediment and erosion controls that were missing. I met out at the site with the developer, and there were no buried stumps. And they are replacing a small section of silt fence that should have, or wattles that should have gone in. And then yesterday I received a call from David Lord, and they are resuming activity on the restoration on Wolf Tree. And the anticipation is that that will be done, this spring. So that one's moving along. And that's all I got for you.
Okay, no, that's good. If either Logan or David Lord don't have time to work on the wetlands analysis on Merritt, you could try Rich Snarsky too, I guess. He also does it. So,
Okay.
but David Lord is probably my first choice if we could get him to do it. So
Yeah, I'll check with David in the morning. He's down this way anyway, checking on Wolf Tree. So.
well, yeah, that's why I think it'd probably be the most efficient and cost-effective one to do it too. So
I'll reach out to him.
There's also Michael Clemens out of Falls Village. I've seen excellent work by him. Michael Clemens out of Falls
We are familiar
Village.
with Michael Clemens. He's come before us before and testified.
Yep, and I have another name I can get you offline.
Okay. Well, we'll
Yeah,
start with
Rima.
David and we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good idea. And no site visits, no new applications pending. So therefore, it's other than this, we are in decent shape. Anybody else have any? Since this is a regular meeting, anybody else have anything they want to talk about? Or
No.
okay, well, we've been going at it for a while, so if probably be good to even though I would say go home, but everybody's home already probably.
Except for me.
Not
Except for Chris, yeah, Chris has had a long
man.
day. We'll let you go home. So
Mhm.
basically, what time is it? It's 9:11. We have a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Jack. Dave, you want a second? Okay, Dave,
Second.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, we're done. 9:11.